Okay, good morning, everybody, or maybe good afternoon, depending upon where you are. Welcome. Thanks very, very much for joining us today. First of all, can I just ask you, can you hear me? Just pop a yes in the text chat if you can. Lots of yeses suggests the system's working. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. Lovely. My name's Rob Dean, and I'm with you here at the conference for the next hour. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from the UK. I've been a teacher, consultant and teacher trainer now for more than 26 years. I've worked in lots and lots of different countries. I've worked as a trainer, and I'm sure I've met many of you in your own countries. Yes, a few of you are mentioning that already, which is wonderful. So great to see you again. Sorry we're not face-to-face today, but the beauty of the internet is that we can be all together while sitting in our comfortable living rooms. That essentially is what I'm doing. I'm talking to you today from a place in the UK. Some of you may know I used to live in Poland. I lived in Wrocław for many, many years. Through a number of circumstances, I moved earlier this year to the UK, and I now live in a small town near York called Pocklington. Pocklington is somewhere you may not really have heard of. You may have heard of York, but Pocklington's a small place. It's got probably about 20,000 population. The centre looks a little bit like that. Although today it doesn't look anything like that because it's raining, of course. This is summer in the UK. Pocklington's famous for probably three things, really. Firstly, there's a very large public school in Pocklington. You know, in English, we say a public school, basically to mean a private school, which is a bit strange, but a famous school. There is also, there are two famous people come from Pocklington. William Wilberforce, who was an anti-slavery campaigner, and also the entertainer Adrian Edmondson, who some of you may have come across as one of the young ones, a comedy actor in the UK. So that's a little bit about where I am. As you'll probably appreciate, I've undergone all sorts of culture shock through having moved over here. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Even though I'm British, I sometimes feel like a foreigner in my own country, having lived abroad for so many years. So today we're talking about teaching adults. We're talking about teaching adults perhaps in rather challenging times as well. But to put a bit of context on things, I'm going to start by going back in time, going all the way back probably about 110 years to the time when it was perfectly normal to go to the seaside dressed like this. We're talking about the time when there is the first documented evidence of English language teaching. Now, what was it taught for in those days? Well, that might sound like a strange question. Essentially, English language teaching then would consist of a lecture about the grammar of the language, essentially what we call nowadays the grammar translation approach, delivered to classrooms of students sitting individually, nowhere near each other, clearly not encouraged to communicate, because at the end of the day, that wasn't what it was about in those days. The teacher would probably be a scary character with a stick, giving the rules. The students will be writing them all down. And why were they doing this? Well, as I said, they weren't really doing this to communicate. They were probably more likely doing this to understand the beauties of English literature, the likes of Shakespeare, of Dickens, and so on. Well, grammar translation still exists, as I'm sure you're aware, in certain classrooms around the world. There are still some teachers who like to read the rules aloud. I would suggest that really, it's a rather outdated way of doing things, and continuing to do too much of that these days is only going to end up with a lesson that looks a bit like this. Perhaps some of you have experienced lessons like this. The teacher walks in, delivers the lecture, in this case on relative clauses. Clauses beginning with question words are often used to identify people and things. Clauses used like these are called relative clauses, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Another brick in the wall teacher, absolutely. Usually the lecture would be concluded with what I often call the killer question. The killer question being, what do you think? The killer question would be, do you understand? And of course everybody would either politely nod or do nothing or say nothing. Yeah, do you understand? Not a very useful question to ask in the classroom, is it? At the end of the day, it doesn't tell us anything whatsoever. Students would often just say, yes, do you understand? Sorry, yes, I understand. Keeping their fingers crossed that the teacher wouldn't ask them to prove it. So nobody's going to admit that they don't understand in front of their friends. They would feel stupid. So basically, as an approach, it's being largely discredited nowadays. There are other ways, and that's certainly something we're going to be looking at later on. The classroom using this approach is often going to look a bit like this. So we're going to try and avoid this today. I hope we do anyway. I hope you're sitting comfortably, but not too comfortably to fall asleep. I will try and make this interactive, as we've started doing already. So there will be a few questions, quizzes, activities for you to join in with. And I'm doing that for a number of reasons. One is to show that even though we're doing this online, we can still make online interactive. So that was then. This is now. And what is now? What do you think about when you think about now? Well, many of us think about one thing. It's a rather devastating thing. It's hit the world like nothing else has hit the world in the last decades. Even bigger than Brexit, I would suggest. COVID, yeah. This has influenced an awful lot of what we do in our everyday lives. Some of us are working from home. Some of us, sadly, have suffered from the illness. Some of us are spending every day, every evening, looking at the statistics and worrying, where's it going to go next? A lot of research has been done about living and working with the pandemic. And to be honest, not everything that's come out of it is entirely bad. Pearson did a research report just recently called The Currency of Learning. And I'd like to just, at the beginning of this session, share with you 5 key things that came from this. The first thing that came from it is that the pandemic has brought in more attention to learning and development. Why is that? Well, we're having to work in different ways. And as a result of that, we're having to retrain. We're having to think about different ways of doing things. People are moving jobs. And as a result, they're in need of learning. They're in need of development. Companies are beginning to see this as an opportunity. At first, it was horrendous. It was a panic. What on earth are we doing? But it's not all bad. We're seeing this as a way of allowing our students to develop skills for employers and employees to work together to improve what they're able to do. They're also looking beyond the simple pieces of paper, certificates, degrees. They're looking at what our employers, our students are actually able to do. And that can include linguistic skills. It's also been realized that companies are needing to provide more than just the money, but they're needing to provide the guidance, the materials, the courses, in fact. And that really is where we come in. And finally, soft skills is something we've talked about a lot in recent years. Soft skills being the things such as interaction, negotiation, presenting, digital literacy, all these sort of things. Soft skills, what makes us people, the things that computers can't do. And one of the things that's come out of this is that soft skills are still vital, but more and more in a digital medium. So working from home is still going to continue. So there's a lot going on there. And as a result of all this, what I'd like to try and do in this session is focus very much on ways in which we can help our students to develop some of these required skills. In our case, proficiency in English. To look at the learning and teaching that's student-centered, and to look at some materials. Materials that I hope you might find interesting. Materials including digital materials that are relevant to real-life needs. Now, before I go on too much, I've just noticed here, students want a course that's a combination of video games and Netflix. I think there's space for some of this sort of thing, but I think there's also space for the human element too. This is why we talk so much about blended learning in this day and age. So I'll try and reflect that in what we do. So what follows is going to be a way of looking at developing communication as the centerpiece of what we do through approaches. through activities, and through those materials. So let's begin by thinking about why we communicate. This might sound like a very obvious question to ask. Why communication? Well, I've thought about this quite long and hard, and I've come up with possibly 6 reasons, global reasons, why we might communicate. The first one could be this, and I've made this interactive. You'll have to unscramble the letters to get the word. Okay, so what is this word? If you unscramble the letters, you get 1 reason for communication. And absolutely right, Yaku would be very quick there. Oh, many of you are fast. Entertainment, indeed. We communicate to share anecdotes, to tell jokes, to tell stories. Reading bedtime stories to children. That's communication for entertainment, for example. We communicate to give and find out this. And again, very fast indeed. Info, quite right, yes. So asking for directions or phoning the help desk to get your computer fixed, that kind of thing. We communicate to share opinions. Some of you are really fast on the keyboards. I'm very impressed with this. Sharing opinions is something we do all the time. We also solve problems. Well done, yeah. Solving problems, it could be on a small scale, deciding what to have for lunch, or maybe trying to solve the problem of the pandemic on a bigger scale. These are all problem-solving situations that need communication. Here's another one. There's no collocation with this, so maybe a bit more challenging, and it begins with S. S for sugar. Well done. Yeah, survival. We communicate to survive. We share information about what's safe, what's dangerous. If we are in danger, we might shout for help. These are examples of communication for survival. And last but not least, making and maintaining stephrelanios. It sounds Greek, doesn't it, to me? But it is, well done again, relationships. We very rarely enter into a relationship with somebody without at first communicating with them. So if those are 6 reasons for communication in everyday life, I would suggest that this is what we should be aiming for in the classroom, what we're doing with our learners, irrespective of their age, incidentally. So what are we aiming for when we're communicating? Well, let's take an example. This comes from a new course. It's a course called Roadmap, which I'm going to be referring to in this session. We've got a Unit 5 topic here, the right person. And when I plan lessons, and as a CELTA trainer, when I've trained others to plan lessons, I've always said to trainees, start at the end, plan backwards. Now, that sounds a bit weird in a way, doesn't it? But I think that's helpful insofar as if you take the page that you're teaching from the course book, look at the very end first and make sure that the end relates to all the different stages that lead up to it. That's what happens with Roadmap. So essentially, you don't even have to do that. It does it for you because our goals at the beginning give us the linguistic outcome, describing a job, the grammar that's needed, and the vocabulary that's involved. And right at the very end, we have a speaking activity, which involves describing a job and talking about what job people would like to do. This, incidentally, is an example of a descriptor taken from the Global Scale of English, which some of you may well be aware of. It's very similar to the Common European Framework of Reference, but a much more detailed, granular version of it. And you can find out more about this on the Pearson website. So going to the end of the unit, see what we're aiming for, and that's our goal. How do we get there, though? Well, I always start with vocab, and the course units do as well. There's a good reason for this. As David Wilkins says, without grammar, little can be achieved. Without vocabulary, nothing can be achieved. So let's have a little look at this. Now, you may have noticed in the blurb, the abstract for this section, that I was talking a little bit about the way our students are different. Their needs and characteristics may vary. So we need to try and deal with that. If we look at these 2 pieces of material, on the left-hand side, taken from the unit of the book, this is from Roadmap again, you'll notice we've got some matching. So for matching, there's only one correct answer to that. It's either right or it's wrong. And then later on the page, we've got things like work in pairs. Do you have the same skills? Do you have similar work habits? That's a bit different, isn't it? That's totally open. There's no correct answer to that. There's no wrong answer to that. So what are we doing here? We're dealing with people who prefer the right answer. They like to follow the map. They're very, very keen on ensuring they've got it right, as opposed to those who quite like expressing their opinions. They're not always bothered about being right or wrong. They just want to say it as they see it. So that's certainly one way that many of the books nowadays do deal with this. And on the right-hand side, we've got the vocabulary bank, a visual approach to things in the back of the book. I always find myself as a learner, I love the pictures. You don't have to be a child to appreciate pictures in a course book, can you? So have a look at this. Let's see what we can do with these pictures. All sorts of things. Matching the words to the pictures is what the book asks us to do, but I'm going to take this a step further. We're going to do a little memory activity. Okay, how's your memory this morning? Is it good? I hope so. All right, I'd like you to look at the pictures. There are 7 of them. I'm going to put the words on there just to make it a bit easier. All right, so we've got accountant, estate agent, vet, lawyer, PA, plumber, and receptionist. Okay, right. You've got 30 seconds now to look at those and memorize them. Okay, don't write anything down, just memorize them. It's water, by the way, I promise. Okay, that was your 30 seconds. Right, what I'd like you to do now, if you've got a piece of paper next to you, or even if you're with somebody else, you've got 30 seconds to recall those 7 jobs. Okay, don't write anything in the text chat at this stage. Just 30 seconds, starting from now. Try and memorize. What were they? Okay, I'm going to count that as 30 seconds. It was probably only 10, but never mind. How did you get on? How many of you got all 7? Anybody get all 7? Put the number in. Oh, yes. Obviously got photographic memories. Some of you got 5 and 6. Fantastic, well done. Okay, here they are, just in case there were any you didn't remember, but you'll notice here a variation on a theme. I've left some of them hidden, okay? So can you remember what B was? If you can remember B, can you pop it in the text chat? And straight away, Diana, well done, yeah. Okay, B was the estate agent, and C, can you remember what C was? Vet, well done, and G was, no idea, receptionist. Well done. Okay, so little activities you can do with a sheet of paper in the course book, the page of the course book. The students could do this in pairs if you're in the classroom together. So one hides the pictures, the other has to remember. For the visual approach we just did, you can use little post-it notes to cover up certain pictures and the students quiz one another. Or as you can just see, you can do this online very, very, very easily. And there is a system by which we can do this using the teaching tools that are available with the course, which I'll show you later on. All right, so ways of activating vocabulary. Another way is through games. Little game for you here. This is a race, okay? What I'd like you to do is think of 4 different jobs. A dangerous job, a job involving traveling, a job where you work alone, and a job where you wear a uniform. Each of the 4 jobs must be different, okay? We're going to do this as a race. So when you're ready, you can write down the 4 jobs in the text chat. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go. got some fast typers around here. Very impressed. Or typists, should I say. Yeah, firefighter, estate agent, writer, policeman. All right, brilliant. We're generating lots of vocabulary through this, have you noticed? Well done. Excellent. There are lots of variations on this little game. It started life, to be honest, as a children's game, but I've done this many, many times with all different ages. You can make it more challenging. You could make sure that all the words have to begin with the same letter, for example. That makes it a bit harder, doesn't it? You could have stuntman, salesperson, scientist, soldier. That would work, wouldn't it? So lots of possibilities. You could do this for pronunciation. So you could have a job containing the sound a job containing the sound r, a job containing the sound e, and a job containing the sound I, for example. Lots of possibilities. So they're all coming in now, and a great way of generating vocabulary at the same time. But games, we're talking about teaching adults today, aren't we? Games in the classroom. Do you play games with your adult learners? I do. And sometimes games can be the best part of the lesson for a number of reasons. First of all, games provide natural opportunities for repetition, particularly board games or games that involve guessing something. You're using the same language over and over again without actually realizing it. Games are also good for strategy, for these soft skills we mentioned at the beginning, critical thinking skills. Everybody wants to win, so how do you win? You have to think about how to do it. And of course, games can be motivating as long as everybody has a chance of being a winner. And doing games that have an element of chance or an element of luck is a good way of achieving that. And of course, games, as we've just seen, can contribute to the linguistic aims of the lesson. So I'm in favour of games, and I think it's a nice way of providing a bit of variety at the same time as working together. And finishing off here with vocabulary, we're activating it here through personalisation. So in this particular situation, the students have to choose where they are on the decline between agree and disagree, and then compare with a partner. So I like working from home, or I don't like working from home, etc. This is a nice way, again, of catering for those learners who love to express an opinion. Again, we talked about closed tasks and open tasks, and this is very, very open. Moving on to grammar, this is something else I'd like to mention just fairly quickly. Grammar at one time, well, we've seen one approach to grammar at the beginning, the grammar translation lecture, not really a particularly motivating or effective way of doing things. From a course that I have in my collection of old course books here in the office at home, I found this. This is introducing present simple question forms and responses. So is this a tree? Yes, this is a tree. Is this a ship? Yes, it is, the short answer. Boring? Yes. Unremarkable? Yes. It continues to be a bit less boring and a little less unremarkable. Some of you may have seen this. Okay. Eckersley Grammar Book. I think you may have seen this before, yeah. Is this a ship? No, it's not a ship. It's a cigarette. Is this a cigarette? No, it's not a cigarette. It's a horse. Fantastic. I have never in my life mistaken a cigarette for being a horse or vice versa. I wonder who came up with these contexts. Obviously, it's old. We don't have anything related to smoking nowadays in our course materials. So that's as it used to be. Nowadays, of course, things have changed. We contextualize things in contexts that mean something. Stuff like this, we're sticking with the theme of jobs, an audio, a discussion about different jobs between two people who are looking for a job. And within this, what have we got? We've got the target language embedded in the dialogue, a job which, someone who, someone that. We can see here, of course, we're dealing with relative clauses. The other thing, of course, is avoiding the lecture wherever possible, involving the learners. And through this step-by-step inductive approach, that's precisely what we do. Let me say this is nothing new. It's been around for some time, and most books nowadays use this approach, which I think is right. I think it's good. So what happens here? The students are guided through a series of questions to work out the rules for themselves. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean as teachers we leave them to it and abdicate responsibility. Of course not. We need to be there to make sure they're getting it right. And this is also where we're dealing with different kinds of learners, some who are more confident than others. I find those who are less confident benefit from having the grammar reference open at the same time as doing the inductive approach questions. However you do this, though, it basically goes back to the principle that I believe, I think it was one of the American presidents, I forget, who first said this. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I... Franklin, thank you very much. I knew it was somebody. And I learn exactly the principle. And then, of course, there's the practice. We're familiar with all the practice activities. A lot of these we see in exams, completing sentences, putting words in order, transformations, filling the gaps, all these sort of things. Things like this, you've probably seen stuff like this many a time. Put the sentences in the correct order to form questions. So how much money does a police officer earn? Will be the first one. Could you help me wash my car? It's a strange thing, isn't it? Think about these in a classroom. Are we interested how much police officers earn unless we are police officers ourselves? Could you help me wash my car? What a strange question to ask your students. Did Vera have a nice holiday? Vera doesn't exist, so how can she have had a nice holiday? I wasn't taking a bath and you didn't call me. So number 4 is ridiculous. And when did Albert last have his haircut? Well, again, Albert's fictitious. All this is meaningless. And no wonder grammar gets a bad name from our students when we present stuff like this. I'm not saying we do nowadays, but we have done in the past. There are other ways, less common, more up-to-date ways of doing it, involving creativity, involving personalization, involving interactivity. If you look at this one, we've been here already, actually. Describe a job for other students to guess. Think of a job you want to describe. It's a game-like activity, but it also contains you. And I always think if a practice activity contains the word you, we're going to have far more success with it than one that relies on talking about fictitious, non-existent contexts. This actually lends itself really well to the 20 questions activity, which you may have come across before, where the students have 20 attempts to get the correct job in this particular case. So we're using meaningful activities here because you is the center of it. In this one, we've got 5 sentences here, all about somebody, I was going to say somebody in this room, somebody in my office, actually, me. All right, there are 5 of them here, but only 4 of them are true. One of them is a complete lie. All right, so what I'd like you to do is see if you can guess which one is the lie. Just put the number in the text chat of the one that you think is a lie. So we've got 4 and 5 so far. I've obviously made this quite challenging. All right. Lots of votes for number 5, and some for number 1, and some for number 2, and number 3. And I know you can't tell, it's a guessing game. All right. Very quickly, let me go through them. This is the stage in a lesson where, of course, you would have your students' undivided attention. All right. They all want to know what the right answer is. So I'll go through them in reverse order. All right. And number 5 is true. Yes, it is. There's my double-decker bus. I didn't say how big it was. It's about 5 centimeters long. Number 4 is true. In the old days, it's adorable, I know, I love it. In the old days, when I lived in Opole in Poland, we had the school I worked for, we had an hour-long radio show on local radio, which was lots of fun. I don't think anybody ever listened, but anyway, it was good to do it. Number 3 is true. In the old days, you were allowed to do that. When we were going on holiday some years ago, the steward asked if we wanted to go to the front to see what was going on. And we did. It was spectacular. Number 2 is also true. I would just say this: be very careful if you go to a country and the people there say to you, "Would you like to try our speciality?" Yeah, I didn't check what it was when I was in Peru, and I was served this horrible guinea pig on a plate, looking at me with its eyes and ears and nose and mouth, and I was terrified. I didn't eat it in the end. Sorry, a quick question from Yvonne. I lived in Apollo between 1994 and 1998, and then I used to live in Wrocław. And I'm afraid my radio show is no longer available. I have it on a few cassettes here and there. I know some of you are showing interest in this, but no, many years ago. Yeah, poor guinea pig, which means number one is a lie. I've only visited 67 different countries, not 68. So an activity then that could proceed by the students writing their own sentences. They then get together in pairs or groups to try and guess which ones are true, which ones are false. And as you can see, this works as well online as it does face-to-face. It can be a nice activity to practice just about any language structure. Just tell the students they should make it challenging. I remember doing this with some teenagers, and they were writing things like, "I've met Darth Vader, I've been to the moon," things like that, which were obvious lies. The other thing about that activity, by the way, is that it's double practice, isn't it? It's written and then spoken. So it does two things at the same time. I'd like to get to what I'm thinking is really the centerpiece of this session, really. We've built up towards the idea of the students communicating through real. And this is where pragmatics come in. How do you define pragmatics? Well, my easy answer to that is to say it's about saying the right thing at the right time to the right person in the right way to achieve a result. And there's very many ways of doing this. As I've just said, I lived in Poland for some time, and a feature of Poland was the kiosk. And I know many countries in Central Europe have the ruch, or equivalent kiosks where you buy tickets and magazines and cosmetics and all sorts of things like this. And I can remember very early on, I realized the way of communicating in Poland was quite different from what I was used to. Going up to a ruch kiosk and, for example, asking for a ticket for public transport, czy są bilety? If there weren't any, you get a very simple answer, nie ma, which means there aren't any. And then I would stand there waiting. Like, is that all you're going to say to me? Is that it? Because in my own culture, and I've had to learn this since coming back to live in the UK, let's say there are kiosks, for the sake of argument, and let's say in the UK, I went to buy a ticket. Do you have any tickets? Oh, I'm so sorry, we've just sold the last one. We should be getting some more tomorrow, but what you might find is that the place over the road has them, and they're open till 7. That place, by the way, they sell nice bread. You could try there on a Wednesday because the cakes there are also very good. Have you got contactless credit card? Because you can pay for a ticket on the train or on the bus, so you don't need a ticket actually, and so on and so on and so on. Now, you can imagine the situation, can't you? And I know I've had Polish friends visit me in the UK over the years, and I've always been amazed at the way they've been given some sort of listening comprehension when they've asked a simple question. The reason being, in some cultures, it simply means, are there any tickets, yes or no? And I don't think it's a question of rudeness necessarily. It depends how it's said, obviously. It's about directness. Question, answer. In a British context, do you have any tickets means far more than that. It means if you don't have any, when can I get some? Where can I get some? And where do they sell nice bread? Things like this. So indirectness is an example of what goes on in natural communication. Some more examples. If I say to you, have you got your car with you? I'm not really interested in where the car's parked. What I'm interested in is, can you give me a lift home? If I say to you, oh, those biscuits look nice, again, I'm not saying to you the obvious. I'm saying, I'd like a biscuit. Can I have a biscuit, please? And in the same way, if I say to you, have you got a minute? What I really mean is, can I have a word with you, please? Or can you come into the office? Or you're fired, or something terrible like this. It's a funny one, isn't it? The last one. Have you got a minute? It's very hard to get somebody's attention in a workplace without making them feel embarrassed or worried or nervous in some respect. So how to do that, I'm not really sure. But all of these examples of indirectness, in actual fact, are about being nice. That's what it's about. At one time, we used to say that clarity was good, but clarity and directness is not always the best way. Sometimes indirectness can make people more likable. Just going back to the biscuits, if I say to you, oh, those biscuits look nice, you could say to me, ah, yes, they're for my daughter's birthday party. I can say, ah, really, how's your daughter? I haven't seen her for ages. And what have we done? We've very neatly avoided the situation of having to say no. And some people don't like doing that, depending upon the culture. So functional language is about saying the right thing to the right person at the right time in the right way. And it's a fascinating area. We're talking about functions, essentially, language to get things done, things like apologizing, arguing, negotiating. All of these fascinate me because there are so many different ways of doing it. So, for instance, if we talk about requesting, I could say, oh, excuse me, would it be okay if I borrow your pen? Or say, lend me a pen. Or could I borrow your pen, please? Can you lend me a pen? Please, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can I borrow your pen? Lots and lots of ways of doing this, depending upon how big the request is in the situation. There's good things about teaching functions. I love teaching functions to students. So many foreigners think Latvians are rude. Well, yeah, going back to what I said earlier, it's this direct thing, and it's not rudeness. I really don't believe that, having lived in Central Europe and traveled there for so many years. It's just directness. Talking about functional language, we're giving students pieces of real English, which I find they enjoy, they'd like. It focuses on real outcomes. I think grammar is about what you know, whereas functions, it's about what you can do, what you can achieve. Old course books, though, on the bad side, don't always reflect what people really say. And going back to this one, some of you may be familiar with this. This everyday communication, conversation exercises in English, book 2. On the front there, we've got lots of expressions. Some of you might recognize this. How extraordinary. Very old-fashioned language. We don't really say that anymore. I also love the way there's a bloke on the front there saying, I could do with a cup of tea. And I also like the way it says at the top, what would you do if you found a goat in your room? So everyday English, I'm not really sure about that. English changes, as we know. It's evolving all the time. And there was a time when we might have taught our students to express surprise by saying, how amazing. But in actual fact, it's far more common nowadays to say, awesome. Whether we like it or not, it's a common way of expressing surprise. What about these? Which is more common, would you say? The one on the left or the one on the right? So just left or right? Yes, yeah, I'm good. At first, I didn't really like that very much. I found it very annoying. But actually, syntactically, it works, doesn't it? Because I am a noun, and noun is described by an adjective, and good is an adjective. Whereas well is an adverb. Anyway, I'm getting carried away, but I'm good is a very common way of doing things. What about this one? One of the most popular English idioms over the years, which is more common now. Yeah, again, the right-hand side. The cats and dogs, sadly, are gone, more or less. You don't hear them very often at all. Okay, oh dear, or what a pain. Again, it's the right-hand side. What a pain, more common than oh dear. And then, whoops, sorry about that, something strange has happened. Just look at the next two. Hello, hi, hey, ho, he, ho, good morning, or how do you do? Yeah, it's the left. How do you do? I liked how do you do. It was very easy to teach, wasn't it? Because we had how do you do? What's the response? How do you do? You could use it anytime, anywhere, but not very common now. And the next one, it's trending, or it's gone viral, or it's become popular. Well, I think we all know that with the advent of technology, we're tending to use expressions like it's gone viral. And then finally, coffee with milk or cafe latte. I'm not offering to make you any, I'm afraid. Yeah, again, it's the one on the right, cafe latte. You don't get a coffee nowadays unless you speak Italian. Have you noticed that? So language evolves, language changes. And it's a question now of finding material that contains the right up-to-date natural language if we're going to be successful in helping our students with these all-important soft skills. So instead of saying how extraordinary, perhaps we're more likely to say things like this. Wow, that's cool, that's awful, great, really, all these sort of things. But where do these come from? How do we get these? Well, actually, you won't be surprised to know these are taken from the roadmap course. At one time, you wouldn't have had things like this in a course book. Wow, it's just a noise, isn't it? But it's a valid, everyday way of communicating now. So if we're going to get our students to use these, how do we do it? That's the next question. Well, giving them a list and telling them to use them, remember them, and memorize them probably is not the best way. Lists are not always the best way of doing things, are they? Shopping lists don't always work. We've all had the situation, haven't we, where we've written our shopping list, we've got to the supermarket, left the list at home, wandered around the shop and bought 5 times more items in the basket than we actually had on our list in the first place. And then when we get home and compare it, we realise we've forgotten several items. So lists in everyday life don't always work. Lists in the classroom are not always the best way. We need to activate them, get students to really work with them. And the 4th lesson of each unit in Roadmap does just that. It's a functional page, English in action, helping students to do all manner of things. In this case, to encourage someone to continue or to react and show interest. So a very, very valid and relevant soft skill, whether we're doing this face-to-face or in a digital context. So what do we need to do first? We need to recognise things so the students listen and tick the phrases that they hear. So they're interacting with the list straight away. Interesting. You may remember I gave you a list earlier on. It was a list of reasons for communicating. One of those was a single word and it began with S. Can you remember what it was? Remember where you unscrambled the letters? Yeah, well done. It was survival, exactly as you're writing now. And I think one of the reasons you're remembering that is because you had to do something with the list, you to interact with it. And in so doing, you've memorized it. So that's the first thing here. We interact with the list. What do we do next? We focus on pronunciation. We get the students to distinguish. So pronunciation is key, isn't it? Sounding genuine through the correct intonation will ensure that the message gets across. So that's amazing. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, the first one sounds genuine, doesn't it? It's all in the music. And then with control practice, so the students read aloud and the other has to respond using the language. And then finally, we move into a productive phase. So the students then have to tell a little story about something that happened. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time in the session today. I could tell you quite a few stories. There was the one when I was in Saratov in Russia, where the waitress in the cafe poured a large pint of beer all over me. And my clothes at the time were lost at the airport. So that was a stressful moment. I could tell you about my time in the hospital in Poland earlier this year or last year, but I don't think you want to hear about that. But these contexts, I'm sure all our learners will have something to talk about, and to give the students an idea by providing a teacher model can be a nice way of doing it too. So a system to get students to communicate. At the end of the day, another soft skill is personal awareness, isn't it? How are we getting on? How are we coping? You've probably seen this cartoon before. It says, I taught Stripe how to whistle. I don't hear him whistling. I said, I taught him. I didn't say he learned it. teaching and learning are not always the same thing, are they? Different people take things up at different rates. We need to provide lots of recycling. We need to provide lots of opportunities to practice, and that's precisely what any good course will do. You remember at the beginning, we looked at our goals in terms of communication, grammar, and vocab. The check and reflect section essentially gets the students to think about this for themselves. These are descriptors from the global scale of English that come at the end of the check and reflect section. So I can describe a job, and we're linking straight back to the very beginning of the unit. So we're linking our goals with our achievements and getting our students to think. You know, the teacher's role at one time was just to tell the students everything. These days, the more we can do to get them to think for themselves, the better it's going to be for them. Now, the materials I'd like to share with you at this stage, there's quite a lot to share with you here. The course is called Roadmap. It's a new 8-level general English course for adults, running all the way from A1 right through to C1. It's tied to the global scale of English. So the grammar, the vocabulary sections, the communication sections, they're all linked together to the idea of can-do statements. So very, very clearly focused on communication. When the course was being produced, a huge amount of research went on, as you will find in any publication situation. I must admit, I've been quite scared at the idea of writing a course book. I wouldn't know where to start, but obviously Pearson are the experts in this. And in so doing, as I say, they did a lot of research. They approached teachers all over the world. And one of the things that came up, well, a few of the things that came up, I'd like to share with you. A teacher here from London called Mr. Atkinson, he said that his students only have 2 hours a week, so not that many lesson hours. Whereas a chap here, a teacher called Mr. Windsor, who I also think is from London, he said his students don't need the writing skills. It's something they don't need in their work. Mrs. Merkel, who's a teacher in Germany, I believe, basically has a very luxurious situation. She's as many hours as she needs in her classes. And over in the United States, Miss Gaga, who's a very well-known teacher there, she said her students, they need extra reading skills. So already you can see what's going on. We're trying to square the circle, aren't we? All these different needs, all these different requirements, essentially the need for a really flexible way of doing things. Well, what they've done with Roadmap is provided a flexible course. This is basically how it works. You have a fast track route, so you've got your 4 lessons plus the check and reflect in a unit. Now, if your students need other elements, we've got the extended route. And at the back of the student book, we've got additional lessons, and each one's a standalone lesson, so it's independent of the rest. We've got reading, we've got writing, we've got listening. So for an extended route, you could take some or all of that. And I think that does nicely to reflect the fact that we all have different number of hours per week, and students essentially with different needs and requirements. So one of the few courses I've come across that actually does that. Books are only part of the story, of course. We're in the 21st century now, and we've established already that through home working, a lot of us are interacting online. Online is a big part of any learning situation nowadays. And we've been talking now about blended learning for probably the last 15 years or so. The idea of blending online learning with classroom study where that's possible. One way we can do that is through providing the classroom materials with the course book, the ebook, I'll show you in a moment, and audio and video material. There is still a paper workbook, should that be required. But there's also something that many of you will have heard of over the years, My English Lab, massively successful online platform for students to practice independently, at the same time as the teacher being able to find out how the student's performance is in the different language systems and skills. Something else that you'll find is the portal. This is fantastic. Basically, it's a free resource and you'll find everything you need there to teach the course. So audio, video, tests, photocopyables. How many photocopyables does the average course contain? Well, I think you'll find probably a dozen. In this one, there are the grand total of 90 plus per level. So that's a lot of flexibility, isn't it? Use some of them, use all of them, use none of them, depends. Veronica, can I come back to your question at the end? Okay, it doesn't quite fit with the topic that we're talking about just now, but it's a very good question. All right. What else have we got on the portal? We have the ebook. Now, this is something that students can use at home independently, and I'm going to show you a little bit of it right now. Okay, the ebook, as it suggests, is an electronic version of the book, and within this, you've got interactive parts. So the audio, for instance.
Recording 13. 1.
Excuse me, can you help me?
Okay, and so on. You can also bring up the audio script. There's all sorts you can do there. And you've got links straight to the video material.
Hello, Ronnie, your roadmap report here. In the news today, there's a report about modern lifestyles.
Okay, so just a quick look at, bear with me a second, get back to where I was. Where was I? I was there. Yeah, so the ebook, essentially, as I say, is a great resource for the students to use. You could get them to use it in class if they want to bring their own devices along, no problem whatsoever. Alternatively, for something to use independently, it's there. You've got links, as I say, to all the different activities in the units. What else have you got? You've got a fantastic tool for the teacher here for presenting or running the lesson, for planning the lesson and delivering the lesson, either face-to-face or online, the presentation tool. I haven't time to show you all of it, but I'm sure if you're interested in this, your Pearson representatives will be more than happy to let you have access to this. It really is fantastic if you haven't already used it. So it allows you to plan a lesson and it provides all the material that you need to teach the lesson using a projector, using a whiteboard in the classroom, or using it online if your students are working remotely. So great ways of developing this digital literacy that we keep talking about. Finally, something else that we've got here, and this is reflecting the fact that our learners, however old they are nowadays, seem to wander around with a digital device in their pockets. Why not put it to good use? And the mobile app does just this. So you've got an app with extra grammar and vocab practice that can be used anytime and anywhere. And it gives answers straight away. So it's independent of the course, but it ties into the different units. So an excellent little resource there. So that's been a little look through, and an hour has gone incredibly quickly. At this stage, let me just answer the question that came up a moment ago, and that was, very, very quickly, in Poland, English is compulsory in nursery schools. All children in nursery schools have to be taught English. Do you agree with this trend? I don't think it's a bad thing, and I know it's a challenge at the beginning to teach very small children, and I have done so myself. Obviously, English teaching with youngsters, with very young children, is all about using songs and nursery rhymes and games and sticking and gluing and painting and all these sort of activities. And certainly we're not going to be teaching the present perfect in the kindergarten. It's not going to be like that. They do say that children at a young age are the most receptive to new languages and new ideas. So why not? I know it's easy for me to sit here and say that when people out there have to actually go and do it. But yes, I'm in favour of it, basically. Why not start them young? It's like with skiing. I used to go skiing in Poland, and it used to annoy me that I could never ski properly. But 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds were zooming down the ski slopes, doing it so well. Why is that? Because they started young. Anyway, it's time for me, almost time for me to finish. I'd like to leave you with a video. And the video is basically an office situation. And I think we'll see with this that language and communication skills, hard skills, soft skills, call them what you will skills, they're all important for getting things done. Have a look at this and enjoy it.
What this organization really needs is a one-on-one approach. Actually, what this organization really needs is repositioning. That means that what this organization desperately needs is change.
I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to watch it again, it's on YouTube. Just put "what this organization needs is," and you'll find it. How extraordinary. Yeah, lovely. So we've got a couple of minutes before I have to disappear. If there are any questions at this stage, I'm very happy to answer them. The webinar's been recorded, so at some stage, if you want to watch it again, you'll be able to. But if at this stage there are any questions, thank you. Thank you all for your feedback. I appreciate that. Okay. Well, I'll put my email address up. There it is. If there are any questions that you think about later, do feel free to email me. Where can you watch it again? Kasia, can you help me with Gosha, sorry, can you help me with that one? It'll be on the Pearson website. If you go to the Pearson website, your local website, whichever country you're in, you should get a link to the webinars. Yeah. When can you see me next? Would you really want to? I'm not sure, to be honest. I will be doing some more of these, I'm sure. So, so keep an eye open. Oh, thank you. I'd look forward to it. It is a pleasure to work with you, even though we're not actually properly face-to-face. The fact that the text chat's been so busy, yeah, on the Pearson website is where you'll find the recording. So yeah, it's been great, and I know the text chat's been busy, which proves to me that not everybody's asleep out there. So wonderful. All right, well, I make it about 1/2 the hour, which means it is about time to stop. So thank you again very, very much. Do enjoy the rest of the conference. There are some more sessions to follow, so I do hope you enjoy those. I think the theme today is on teaching adults, basically, so enjoy that. And I do hope we meet again, either online or hopefully one of these days, face-to-face. So thank you very much indeed. Take care, all the best. I hope to see you again. Thank you.